All right. Hey, everybody. Back again. Today, we are going to talk about Def Leppard. You may know this band from their multiple huge pop rock 80s mega hits. You may know them from the heartwarming story when their drummer lost his arm and them continuing and sticking by his side, creating a customized drum kit, which would allow him to play with his feet, and then going on to release additional hit albums after that. But did you know that before Def Leppard's signature sound took over the airwaves in the 1980s, they had their first album, a heavy metal album. Was it heavy metal? We're going to find out. It was called On Through the Night, and we're going to talk about that album today, trucking on with big guitars. So let's do it. All right. Thank you guys for being here. Back again today, second show in a couple of days. And I'm excited about it because I've been wanting to get back after taking a little break there. And last night we did Danzig 2, Lucifuge. And I've been wanting to do this Def Leppard album for a while now, just because it's like, it's such a fascinating thing that they, have their signature sound, but then they have this one-off album that's like supposedly totally different. So, we need to explore that. If you don't know who Def Leppard is, you probably do if you clicked on this video. They got a sound. They are distinctive sound, big 80s band. Today I am wearing, I don't have a lot of 80s clothes. I'm really like not an 80s kind of fashion gal. I did the best I could. I went with the lipstick that is sort of blisteringly, painfully baby pink. I thought that was appropriate. I tried to do a feather technique with my hair, get those like finger lines in there. That didn't really turn out, but I gave it a shot anyway. I was a kid in the 80s, elementary school kid, and then teenager in the 90s. So I do have a lot of good memories of like 80s music and 80s style and culture at the time in America. For the clothes, though, I like a lot of dark colors, didn't have any acid washed jean jacket or anything like that. So in honor of the very brave drummer, I chose a t-shirt with an inspirational message that says, I can and I will. So I can recognize the hardships that he must have faced in coming back, trying to play music after his tragic accident. And also, at the last minute, the inspiration hit me that the next best thing to have, if I didn't have anything neon, acid washed, like cut off white band t-shirt with the arms cut off or anything like that, was a scarf with leopard print for Def Leppard. So, hopefully that works out in that way. For the drink, I couldn't really find anything that I thought may apply to, the 80s specifically either. So I'm going to go with my favorite, cream soda Zevia. And for the candle, I tried to think of some 80s scent. And the only thing that I could imagine was like the potpourri bowls that my mother used to have, or like the sort of spicy, like Christmassy smells that she used to have at the holiday time, like a cinnamon apple sort of spray that may just have been our house. I don't know. So the one that I grabbed was the most neon candle that I could find. In this case, neon pink. So we got the pink and purple, Those, if I remember, the popular combination of colors at the time for the 80s was this pink and purple and teal, like a blue, more blue than green, but you know, this and like a teal. So we'll light that up. All right. All right. Yeah, and we're going to talk about on through the night. We're going to talk about Def Leppard a little bit. And I guess I have to start by saying personally, I would not consider myself a Def Leppard mega fan. Not to say that I don't like them. In fact, I really do like them. But it's another reason why I wanted to choose this band and an album that I wasn't as familiar with, because I've been going a lot with like albums and things that I'm completely obsessed with, that I could hear in my head without even like giving them um any kind of listen really. And it's been a little easier like for me to just spout off about something that I was like naturally going to listen to anyway. And so I wanted to choose this because it's just like I like their hits. That's the kind of, I would say, fan that I am of this. I like their hits. If it came on, I would not turn it off. The big ones like Pour Some Sugar on Me. I like Hysteria. I like Love Bites. Like I said, I was a kid in the 80s, so I'm familiar. And I have great memories. Like the one that really came to mind is when we were a kid growing up in my hometown, there was like a roller skating rink. And that was one of the funnest things to do, was like skate around to all the 80s hits. So I have like really fond memories of like skating around, little kid, Bon Jovi's blaring, then it'd be Skid Row, it'd be Guns N' Roses, and like Pour Some Sugar on Me, and Warrant, Cherry Pie. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I love that stuff. But I would say, like, in terms of music, I probably like put myself more in the 90s, because that's just when I was a teenager and things were so like affected me so much in that way. So I'm about Def Leppard. I'm more of like a casual fan. If it came on, I'd start singing along to it. But I didn't believe when I started this project that I even had any Def Leppard albums. So when I went to look, because I still have all my music stored in digital files and in my, the music application, the old iTunes new music one now, on one like computer that has a lot of room on it. And I looked and I did have 2 Def Leppard albums, Adrenalize and On Through the Night. And that's the one that we're going to talk about today. I got excited when somebody told me about this album, years ago, because it was like, oh, they have this secret, heavy metal album that doesn't sound like any of their other stuff at all. So it's like secret thing to find out about and everything. So I got excited to find out about that. And it didn't disappoint. It did not disappoint listening to it again today. So I'm super stoked to talk about it. I like to point out here, continuing along this line of thinking of, not being like an obsessive mega fan of something. If you are a sound tech, an engineer, or, a fan just in terms of audio appreciation and like general curiosity, like a lover of sound, anybody who's here, hopefully you get inspired, or, maybe you've been doing it forever, who knows? One of the first things that I think you learn is that like everybody's got personal preferences. Like there are things that I naturally gravitate to on my own. And you guys have seen like some examples of those types of things. If it's bluesy metal, count me in. But ultimately, as you start to work and as you start to like really open your mind and explore different kinds of sounds, your personal preferences, will not tend to matter as much. Like is something that's still going to be personal to you, but especially if you're working and doing this stuff, you really need to put like your personal preferences aside, um, because you find that you are not where you are working and doing this as a fan anymore. You are to serve. You're there to analyze technically and try to capture the sounds and represent the band's vision of their sound to the best of your ability. So you're using your skills to serve somebody else's vision. And I think that that's a really important thing to remember. You're not there to judge. So if they want to stay true to the genre, or if they want something that's like a little outside of their genre, like, it's your job to try to understand what they're going for and to try to pull that off for them, which is why it becomes so important to have exposure to the widest variety of music and sounds that you possibly can. And so this is, another reason why I'm doing this channel and having it be genreless, because, I mean, ultimately, it's not reviews. Like, who cares what I think, right? I mean, I have my commentary, but like everybody's got an opinion. And we all just want to explore things that, maybe we wouldn't naturally explore either. Like, that's kind of the fun of it. Like, try something new. Maybe you like it. But so, um, my assumptions and belief about this album, or the story of Def Leppard, because I know, like, I want to take this in a different direction, because I'm sure I can imagine there's probably like 1,000 documentaries on the tragic and heartwarming story about the drummer losing his arm. Like, I expect that somebody's already done all of that way better than I could ever do. And so, if that's out there, you can go look for it. But I don't really actually know. I've never watched one of the documentaries about them. So what I was thinking before I even went into the album, I wanted to capture my thoughts down. I thought what happened was that Def Leppard was intending to be a metal band. Like, that was their intention from the beginning, like heavy metal, to the extreme. And then they started that and they made like this one album, and then the drummer lost his arm. And not only did they have to customize the drum kit so he would be able to play, but also completely switch genres and styles. And I had the belief and assumption that they switched to this like very soft, slow tempo pop rock, if you will, because that was what it would the drummer would be able to handle given his condition. So that was my assumption. And then I found out as I started to look into this that I was wrong, which I'm okay with. Like, that's not what happened. Like, I think, that may have been made for, another one of my fever dreams. It may have made for a better story, like in my mind, because it was be like more of an extreme story. But what I found is they did have albums prior to the drummer's arm loss. So let's take a look at that first, because this was the first thing I looked up when I was trying to understand the situation. And so I said, how many albums did Def Leppard make before their drummer lost his arm? Def Leppard released 3 studio albums before drummer Rick Allen lost his left arm in a car accident on New Year's Eve 1984. Those initial 3 records were On Through the Night, 1980, their raw new wave of British heavy metal influence debut, High and Dry, released in 1981, the album that brought them mainstream attention via MTV with Bringin' On the Heartbreak and their first collaboration with producer Robert John Muttlang. And Pyromania, 1983, the massive breakout hit that went diamond, featuring staples like Photograph and Rock of Ages. Following the accident, the band famously stood by Alan while he worked with engineers to design a specialized custom electronic drum kit that allowed him to play using his left foot to trigger the snare notes. Exciting stuff. He returned to the studio for their fourth album, Hysteria, released in 1987, which became the biggest commercial success of their career. So, we learn here in looking at this, like, their genre and style change did not stem from the accident itself. So I was completely wrong about that. And I found that fascinating. They were like moving into that slower, softer, sort of more emotional type music before that happened. So that was pretty interesting. Yeah. Yeah, so you've got the touching story of them staying together. There they are right there. After this tragic accident happened to him. And, then you've got my interest, of course, like in all the super geeky stuff about the customized drum kit construction. And so I was like, oh my God, that's the road I want to go down. How is it made? What are the foot pedals? What actually happens? How, can he, that was really fascinating to me and nerding out wise. And so, I just casually was looking that up a bit. And let's see if I asked about that. Yes. Okay, here we go. I asked about that next. And it says, can you explain how Def Leppard's customized drum kit for their drummer who lost his arm works? After losing his left arm in a 1984 car accident, Def Leppard's Rick Allen reinvented his drumming technique through a sophisticated blend of electronic and acoustic integration, shifting the responsibilities typically handled by his left hand to his left foot. Rather than attempting to play a standard drum kit with one hand, Allen adopted a game of substitution. He mapped the rhythmic duties previously performed by his left arm to a series of custom electronic foot pedals. By utilizing his left foot to trigger snare, tom, or cymbal sounds, he freed his right hand to focus on the medley and primary drive of the percussion. It's an electronic acoustic hybrid. His kit is primarily electronic, which allows for the triggering of specific drum samples. This is crucial for consistency in live performances. While he often uses acoustic elements, the backbone of his sound relies on electronic pads that provide reliable, punchy triggers. He's got custom foot pedals. Allen uses a specialized pedal board on the floor. These pedals are mapped to different parts of the drum kit, allowing him to play snare drum parts, tom fills, or specific percussive accents that would normally require a second hand. The electronic pads and foot pedals are connected to processing modules. These units translate the physical strike or press into a MIDI signal, which triggers high-quality drum samples. Because he is essentially playing triggered parts, Allen works extensively with drum technicians to ensure the sounds he hears in his monitors perfectly match the big rock sound the audience hears, often using sophisticated sampling software to manage the mapping of the sounds across his kit. He's spoken in interviews about how this setup has forced him to become a more creative player, since he can't play rapid-fire consecutive beats on a single drum using only one hand. He uses his feet to fill in the gaps. By alternating between his right hand and his left foot, he can create complex fluid rhythms that sound remarkably close to a two-armed drummer while maintaining the unique signature sound that defines Def Leppard's music. Yeah, landmark example of adaptive technology in music, proving that by rethinking the mechanics of the instrument, a performer can overcome significant physical challenges without sacrificing artistic expression. Freaking amazing. I know, 1,000 documentaries have said that, I'm sure. But I find that absolutely amazing. And so the next place that I went, of course, was the link that they had here. I wanted to see because, let's not reinvent the wheel. Somebody has already made a video about this and exactly how Rick Allen uses electronic drums. This guy, shout out to this guy with 65 drums. He goes through the entire kit, shows like exactly the pedal and how like he had to dampen it a little bit, the different parts and pieces and everything. This is a great video if you want to look this one up and see exactly what was done. So, good job on this guy totally explaining that. It was really well done. And I appreciate that because, those are the kind of things I'm interested in. So, yeah. Yeah. And I will say, too, another thing that, is really so special and touching to me at the moment was the emotional component that I imagine is, within the story. I'm not sure what any documentary focuses on, but for him personally, the courage and strength it must have taken to be in that much pain and to absolutely refuse to give up playing your music after an injury like that. It's really inspiring. It was like for me personally, if you guys can see right here, I went back to try to play guitar after like 10 years of not playing. And so I played extensively, like full on out for over 20 years. And then, I got completely burnt out and did not do anything for a long time. And I went a little full force. And I started to have like a lot of spasming and I still kept going. And then, other things with like editing and to make a long story short, it wasn't just the guitar, but my right arm is completely shredded. And it has been for like a solid 6 months. And like, I desperately want to play guitar and sing again. It's like, I felt so much like me, just free. And it just was such a good feeling to get back there. It's like you remember who you are. And now I feel like it took such it was such a hurdle, like emotionally, to get to that point where I was like, okay, the past is behind me. I want to play again. And then to get there and to have the thing stop you be physical, it's just like, wow. And also, um, I mean, I can't compare myself to what this person has been through because his injury is 100 times more extreme than what's happening to me at the moment. But like, it's just scary. You feel that fear of like, uh, okay, I mean, this has been going on for 6 months. Like, really, like, what if I can't ever play guitar again? Like, what if things just never heal? you know? And that sort of fear then turns into like a sadness and then it just snowballs on itself. So I just want to acknowledge, the struggle that this must have been for a musician. And, not only to say like his friends and his band members sticking around him through that, but personally, like the obstacles that he must have had to overcome not only like physical challenge, but an emotional challenge as well. So he is really an inspiration. Really is. So yeah, I think we'll go back now. I usually do this at the beginning as a recap. I would assume, Def Leppard is just such a huge band. But we'll go back and just read a little bit about them to start with. Who are they? Who is Def Leppard? Um, it's hard to not know about them, but let's see if we can find out anything new. So there they are right there. Phil Collin, Vivian Campbell, Joe Elliott, Rick Savage, Rick Allen. Members in 2018. Years active 1976 to present. So we got another band with huge discography and a very long running time. Def Leppard are an English rock band formed in Sheffield in 1976. Since 1992, the band has consisted of Rick Savage on bass with backing vocals. Great bass player. Well, 1992. I guess that album must have been made before that. So I don't know if that was him on Through the Night. Joe Elliott, lead vocals. Rick Allen, drums. Phil Collin, guitar and backing vocals. And Vivian Campbell, guitar and backing vocals. They established themselves as part of the new wave of British heavy metal in the early 1980s. The band's first album, On Through the Night, reached the top 15 in the UK, but received little notice elsewhere. And I don't know why, because it's pretty amazing. Like, the guitars, they're great. Their second album, 1981's High and Dry, was produced by Mutt Lange, who helped them to define their melodic hard rock style. Yeah, it's different. It's significantly a different sound. The album's most popular track, Bringing on the Heartbreak, became one of the first rock videos played on MTV in 1982. Yeah, there you go. It's always good in any kind of thing that's emerging to get in on it, like when it first comes out, and be one of the pioneers there. And of course, MTV would be, a good thing to get in on. Their next studio album, Pyromania, the first with Collin, featured on 5 tracks, replacing guitarist Pete Willis, who played rhythm guitar on the entire album before getting fired, was released in January 1983 with Photograph and Rock of Ages, both topping the US Rock Tracks chart and reaching the top 20 of the Hot 100. Okay, we know. They had a lot of hit records. Just listing a lot of their accomplishments. Really, what I want to know is about the genre switch. There's something that I read here. Yes, okay. Let's just read this. So we're talking about On Through the Night today. And let's read about this. Def Leppard's debut album, On Through the Night, was released on March 14th, 1980. Although the album hit the top 15 in the UK, many early fans were turned off by the perception that the band was trying too hard to appeal to American audiences by recording such songs as Hello America and touring more in the US. A performance at the Reading Festival in August was marred when audience members expressed their displeasure by pelting the band with beer cans and bottles filled with urine. Yeah. Or a sign of appreciation. You know that old punk rock thing where it's like if you've got an audience and the band is up there spitting on you, that's supposed to be a sign of love and appreciate. I mean, bodily fluids, spit, urine. Perhaps it was a sign of love. But yeah. All right. Just going on to talk about their history. In short, lots of hit records, big tragic incident. Let's look at their discography and see how many there are. So we've got studio albums: On Through the Night, High and Dry, Pyromania, Hysteria, Adrenalize, Slang, Euphoria, X, Yeah, Songs from the Sparkle Lounge, Def Leppard, and Diamond Star Halos. Recent, really recent. So yeah, they're not slowing down. It doesn't look like. Let's see, this is 5. Wait. 5, 12. 12. Spanning like 42 years. Which is another one, pretty incredible. I guess, you've been doing it so long, like you just want to keep going, and why shouldn't you? Why shouldn't you? I mean, just somebody said it before, but I'll say it now again. Just make stuff. Like, why not? Who cares? Put things out into the universe in that way. So yeah. But since we're going to talk about On Through the Night, let's read a little bit about that one, because it's supposed to be the secret heavy metal album that Def Leppard made. So let's see what we can find out here. Their debut studio album, released in 1980. The album was produced by Tom Allom. Charted at number 15. Wasted, Hello America, and Rock Brigade were released as singles. The album received mostly positive reviews. Steve Huey noted in a retrospective review that On Through the Night established the band as one of the leading lights in the new wave of British heavy metal. Yeah, it may lack the detailed production and more pop-oriented songwriting of their later efforts. Yeah, I would not call it pop. Some Leopard fans prefer this sound. They really should. They should have continued on with this, I feel. I like it more than a lot of their other stuff. On Through the Night was a welcome breath of fresh air among the dark, thrashy, and punky music coming from the UK at the time. He stated that guitarists Pete Willis and Steve Clark shoot from the hip, packing their licks into tight 3-minute pop arrangements, and that lead singer Joe Elliott wails wonderfully in a resonating tenor, fortified by backup harmonies and Tom Allom's battering ram production. I don't know if I would call it heavy metal. I mean, we'll get into that. But yeah, people seem to like it. I mean, it's good for a debut album, that's for sure. It was getting some traction there. So here are the tracks here. We've got Rock Brigade, Hello America, Sorrow is a Woman, It Could Be You, Satellite, When the Walls Came Tumbling Down, Wasted, Rocks Off, It Don't Matter, Answer to the Master, and Overture. There we go. And then here's the lineup playing on this album right here. So, yeah. I mean, of course, my focus and interest is like the change in the sound. I don't know exactly how much I found, but it's so vastly different, this album, than any of their other material. It's kind of incredible. So the Def Leppard sound as we know it, as you probably, have heard a million times on the radio for the last 45 years. Soft rock, I would say 80s pop rock, themes of heartache, emotions, pain, a lot of harmonies, a lot of harmonies. Slow tempo, very radio friendly. A sound that really characterized the 80s as far as that mainstream pop rock sound. I would say, like men with feelings and guitars. Feelings and guitars. But for this album, um, the fabled heavy metal album, On Through the Night, let's get into talking about that specifically, do some audio analysis. Let's get it back up there. There we go. There it is right there. Do some audio analysis. I'm going to go track by track in general. I kind of did like a stream of consciousness for this one, just because it's not one that I was totally familiar with. So I was able to like really react to everything I was hearing in the moment as it came on and just like jot notes as fast as I possibly could. So pull it up, if you've never heard it before. That's another reason I wanted to do this. Like, this may be one that people like have not given a chance, or they've heard all the hits so many times. It's like, this is I don't know, what do they call that? Like a deep cut? Have you ever heard of this? For one thing, the first thing you'll notice as you look at this album cover is like, dude, we're trucking through space with guitars. We're trucking through the outer space and we're bringing big guitars. We're hauling big guitars up near the moon. Yeah, that's great. I would say that's pretty much like what it sounds like too. That's like kind of a visual description of the sound of the album. And so yeah. Okay. So let's get into it. Pull it up, listen to it, tell me what you think. Do you like it? Because my first impression of this, I'm thinking heavy metal. I would not call it that. I'd say it sounds like Kiss, like a little Black Sabbath. If you want to call that heavy metal, it's not like when you say heavy metal, I'm thinking like, the metal gets heavier as time goes on. But for this time, like 1980, I guess you would call it that. Kiss meets Black Sabbath. Like the music on this album is a faster tempo, definitely, than the standard pop rock Def Leppard stuff. I would say it's rock. It's guitar rock. Like, dude, there's some fantastic guitars on this album throughout the whole thing. Solid guitar rock, a lot of guitars, all the things you would want and expect. Big riffs, licks, huge solos, beautiful arpeggios, going off like onto different modal things, but the 80s like to do the modal stuff with the solos, and you can hear that on here. It's like the opener, Rock Brigade. Let's get back to the track list. There we go. Yeah, the big opener, song 1, Rock Brigade. Like, I'm listening, I'm getting my first impressions. I'm like, all right, okay, the guitars are happening. Big guitar solo at 1:30. And then that's when it first turned like into the modal sound. Very 80s. That's an easy way to explain modes. It's sort of like building a scale off of another scale. That's probably the simplest way to put it. And it gives it like a certain unique character and flavor in like where you're going with it. And, in the 80s, the rock was very popular. People could like have blossoming careers, playing rock and roll and being able to play guitar. Like, the technical aspect of playing guitar was very, very important at the time. And so if you were a great player technically, you would want to like have a lot of that music theory going on. And as music theory starts to become more complex, then you're going to start to learn, not just the standard scales, but you're going to learn the modes. And so then they had a lot of incorporation of that in the 80s. To show that they were capable of those sort of techniques. So it's a distinct sound. 1 minute, 30 seconds. And then Hello America, the second song. In general, my thought here, I'm thinking the mix is all overall, the mix it's lacking like presence, it's lacking that modern sound, but specifically the vocal on this whole album is not as loud. So like if it were me, like I would, turn that up a little bit, but really like the entire mix sounds like it's kind of in a can in a lot of ways. And it needs to open up, like it needs to breathe. But I was listening to the Spotify version that was remastered. But I was listening on my beautiful, like huge monitors over there so that I can hear exactly everything. And who knows, like I would assume that the original mix sounded like that. There's nothing that I noted that you could really like do to it, beyond like going back and remixing the thing that would like significantly change that. So I'm gonna say that that was like pretty as accurate to what it originally was. But yeah, so bring it out of the can would be my suggestion. Um, but then again, in Hello America, you're hit with like another big guitar solo. And I'm like, I'm continuing to be so impressed because that's not what you expect from Def Leppard, like these huge solos and the harmonies too. Um, very well blended. We expect that from Def Leppard. Like their harmony game is pretty top notch. Um, very well blended, like in the sense that they're almost glued together. And I noticed here, I'm gonna try not to like geek out super super hard, but if you'll allow me, um, you know, very high pass filter, like almost nothing in the lower frequencies left for those harmonies, and then very like short delay, but super extreme. Reminded me, the first thing that came to mind was Aerosmith. So like if you go listen to Love in an Elevator, because that one's really, really obvious. Like go listen to the harmonies that are going on Love in an Elevator, and you can hear it's like very high end, super like grit cutting through at the top like that. So this is what we're talking about. And then as the album went on, it was all I could hear and it was all I could think about. And then I started like obsessing about it. So, maybe I was thinking, at that time that records were being created, like it may be a technique of the time to do that with the harmonies like that and some of the vocals, in a lot of ways. Cause, it seems like I remember it being pretty common. So, and then you get to track 3. And my thought here as I was listening to this was like, all this sounds like a completely different band. Like by now you're like well into the album. I'm like, is this Def Leppard? Because it doesn't really it sounds so vastly different. Um, Good guitars, same. Good bass line in this song. Listen, yeah. And then I'm like, fuck, another awesome guitar solo. There's just the solos. They're hitting you in the face with these solos on this album. And um, I would say too, like as a comparison to their other material, at my personal preference, this album I would say would be more of my personal preference. It's more, I would say, like a gritty's 70s rock, gritty 70s, like less than like more cleaned up 80s pop rock. And then on this song, Sorrow is a Woman, at 2 minutes and 36 seconds. Here's another like technique that they used to do. This is kind of like a 70s thing. Check out the doubling that they did with the guitar, like playing the exact same line as at the same time as another one, like the harmony above it. And then I was thinking, that's so 70s. I was thinking, I believe that that's called double stops. And I wanted to look that up while I was on here because I wanted it to be a surprise. So I'll go, what is a double stop in terms of guitar techniques? Let's see if I have this correct here. Okay. Oops. Let's move this over. It's like the Jimi Hendrix thing. Okay. Sorry, you guys. There we go. Okay. In guitar terminology, a double stop is a technique where you play exactly 2 notes simultaneously on the instrument. Rather than strumming a full chord, which typically involves 3 or more notes, or playing a single melodic line, a double stop isolates 2 notes to create a specific harmonic texture or melodic emphasis. You fret 2 separate strings and then strike them at the same time using a pick or your fingers. Double stops are frequently used in blues, country, and rock to thicken a melody. Yes. They add a harmonic interval to a single note, making it sound fuller and more aggressive without the clutter of a full chord. So this is what we're talking about. Like that technique in the 70s where they would play that one melodic line and then they would play the same melodic line, like just an interval above it. Like you can hear it on all of these big rock songs. And so here we have it here. Also, on Through the Night. Yeah, very 70s. So then when we get into track 4, It Could Be You. This one is like rocking. It was like fast tempo. And then I was thinking, dude, this rocks. And like, oh shit, another big guitar solo at 1 minute and 30 seconds. Like, and I was like getting into it. I'm like, holy shit, this is so good. And I was getting all excited about it, this album in general. But then we got to track 5, Satellite. And now I was focusing on the vocal and like it took over my whole analytical mind and it was all I could think about, as it went on, because I started thinking about like ideas about how they really get that like grit on top of the vocal. I was like, just these are the things I think about, you guys. I'm like such a freaking nerd. I was starting to think about like gain staging. And so gain staging when you do audio is like basically the simplest way that you can put it is like what effect or adjustment or manipulation, like in terms of processing, are you going to put in what order? Because whatever you put before the thing that comes after it affects that thing. It's like the order that you're placing your processing in. And then I was like, how do they get this vocal? Because it is so common for that time. It's like you're hardcore EQing the reverb, or just are you like EQing the vocal and then only putting the reverb / delay on the very top frequencies of that vocal? But so, if you don't know what I'm talking about, pull up the song Satellite on this album and listen to the vocal. Like start, simple. If you're trying to identify this stuff still, can you hear that little like grit on the top when he hits the consonants? It sounds like the top part of the vocal sounds like it's like cutting or like slashing a little bit through the air. At least that's what it sounds like in my mind. That top little air of it that's like you know, think about if you can hear that. Um, and then I started thinking about like Def Leppard's vocals in general. Like they have always been a little buried. And then I was thinking like, why? Why? Um, because and mostly it sounds like just very thin. I think thinner than that it could. Like it's not the modern technique of having like a vocal in your face. And really a lot of only like high end, really. A lot of highs, not a lot of nothing on the lower end. And my guess was when I thought about this, because these are the things I think about, um, is that maybe there's just so many blended harmonies that come in like through all of their music that you have to like keep everything super thin or else there'd just be too much like clashy, muddy frequencies like smashing around into each other. And it's just like, well, I'm thinking, can't you just have the main vocal like more present and fuller um, on the parts where the harmonies aren't? But it's almost like they really just kept the main vocal like steady as she goes, thin through the whole thing, and then the harmonies come in, and it's like okay, well, um, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but it's just like something to notice. And then it started driving me crazy a little bit because I'm just used to like modern. I want more vocal, like I want more. But that's not Def Leppard sound. They kind of are. Their vocals are a little back. And even here on this pure um, guitar rock record, yeah, the vocals are I like went off on this other tangent too, where I started thinking about like Fleetwood Mac, like doing all of their vocals and harmonies, and then they just kept recording it over and over, and like the tape would, like the actual like analog tape would get super thin, and like everybody who was mixing it also was like just so high on cocaine that they started taking the lows out of everything. And then I was like, did I imagine that or did that actually happen? Like, who knows, dude? Who knows? But I would say also, for this album, in terms of like the way that it's mixed, there's no real like, we have the real modern compression these days in limiting that just smashes everything together and puts it up in your face. And so, naturally, being the modern lady that I am, kept turning it up, you know? I turn it up. Because there's a something that happens to your ears and your brain at a certain level of loudness where everything like starts to flatten out. And it's going to be in my lessons, but if I'm just going off memory right now, I think it's called the Fletcher-Munson curve. And it's about like 83 decibels or something. But anyway, there's a point if you turn something up loud enough that it like really, smashes it together. It's like the flattest part of your hearing. Um, so I kept turning it up, trying to like, get it to there because I wanted more vocal. Like I wanted to hear. But even kept turning it up. And even when I did, the whole rest of the mix was just like kept getting louder and the vocal just still didn't even so this was not a case to the point of like the person mixing it like mixing too loud. I'll say that that's my assessment because if it was, at some point it would flatten out to probably the level that they mixed at. That's my guess. But it didn't. It still needed more. Um but yeah, this song Satellite, guitars galore, finger picking, big solos, wah pedal solos. And then we get to track 6, When the Walls Came Tumbling Down. I was still like, obsessing over the vocal, but yeah, no. So here I'm still doing it. You just hear like if you listen to it, there's two parts to it. Like there's the actual voice, the voice part, like the main meat of the sound at like a super low level meaning like volume in this case. So, and then I thought, all right, what we're hearing is the wet and the dry. So if you, this is going to be, if you want to know more about this stuff, this is going to be in lesson 8, I believe, time-based processing. But when we're talking about wet and dry, we're talking about reverb and delay. And essentially, so some people learn them as two separate things, but reverbs are really just very, very short delays that your brain cannot process yet as being two separate sounds, like in terms of milliseconds of echoing. And when it starts to get like more and more and more, you're like, oh, and you can determine that that's like a sound and then a repeat of the sound. And then so in this case, when you think about this vocal for this track, number 6, you hear the original dry sound, the vocal. And when we talk about like the wet of it, in this case, we're talking about delay. It's like the processing effect that you were putting on this vocal to make it sound like that. And what you can do whenever you are processing any type of signal is that you can adjust the wet and the dry. You've got the original, and then you've got the repeat of the sound that's coming. And you can adjust the timing that it repeats in to create a different effect to it. So, wet, dry. And if you've ever done this in your audio workstation, your software, like you'll see that as a component that you can adjust. So that's what that is, right? And depending on like the ratio that you put things in, you're going to get different effects. So like, I think, this is my guess, of course, for this vocal, it's like a delay, like the wet of this signal, the delay on the vocal is turned up. So it's like super heavy and certain frequencies hit it because either they put, I know, I'm sorry, you guys, I'm like geeking out. They put the EQ like after the dry or like in between, like before it. But something is like having the original signal hit that like delay super, super freaking hard, like right at that top end. And that's what's giving you that grit. I thought about it for a while. These are the things I think about. That's my guess, I think. But yeah. And so my conclusion, if any of that made any sense, is that it sounds like they were trying really hard to sound like Ozzy. It sounds like it was, for that time, like an imitation of Black Sabbath, and the vocal on that, because it has that sort of, you hear that in Ozzy's vocal. It's not as extreme as this, with that cutting through and that gritty part up top. But that's what gives the Ozzy that little bit of freaking edge, man. And it sounds good when it's done properly. But yeah, I mean, this album in general is just the way that it's mixed is old school. And that, that's not always a bad thing. Like the guitars are very audible. Like you can tell they're like, this is a guitar album, crank it freaking up. There's not a lot of snare or cymbals that really cut through on this album. The toms, the bass, the kick sound okay, but even the kick drum, it's like more old school, like softer sort of thud that just like feels like a presence. I mean, these days, modern, we like have that thing freaking hit you. Um, and the vocal itself too. I mean, I will say, like, he's not a crooner. This is not the type of voice that he has. And everybody's voice is unique. It's more like high pitched, little sort of I don't want to say thin on its own, because I mean, if there's things that they're doing to it that thin it out. But he's not. I'm saying he's not got like that deep bass, like where you're gonna croon and like have the vibrato and like get all the chest. That's not what this is. So, um, if you need proof that this is an incredible guitar album, because that's what I would really put this in the category of, and you only need one song to prove it, listen to track number 10, Answer to the Master, and you'll know where this album is going. Because, like, man, it's a great bass line in that one, too. Like, the drum breakdown. Oh, God, yeah, some just great guitar work in that song. And I would say, yeah, I noted, not the most modern kick and toms, but very well balanced there, like in the drums. Very pleasing sound and feeling to the drum kit. I noted that for that song. And then when we got to the end, the song Overture, here of the vocals on this one, beautiful, like ethereal vocals. Those harmonies like drowned in reverb, so gorgeous, really pretty. And then that big 70s rock groove comes in with the harmonizing guitars again, comes in. And by the end of the album, I really started having like a deep appreciation for the way these drums are mixed. Like it's an older style, but they're very smooth and supportive. That beat doesn't hit you in the face, doesn't hit you in the chest, but it's more like of a like creamy and mellow type of sound. It's just a balanced, balanced drum kit in that way. So, you guys kept up with me geeking out. Overall, I would say clearly this album was about the guitars and bass guitar included in that, like very intricate melodic bass lines all over the place. And, the bass is a guitar. And in this case, it was another guitar that just happened to be, on the lower end there. So that's what it was used for here. I didn't think this sounded a thing like Def Leppard at all, except for the vocals. Same thin, heavily affected vocals. That classic Def Leppard sound, the vocals is still here, but musically, like completely different. And so, which led me to my question that I still have not answered, is like the style change, the genre change. Like if it wasn't the accident that the drummer went through that sort of like forced this style change as I imagined that it was, like why such significant difference in this first album than like the songs that they continued to write? It feels like I wrote it feels violent. It feels like a violent change, an upheaval, if you will. but then I thought, like, well, I haven't really experienced their album after that. And that next album could be like a bridge or an evolution, like a bridge between the two. Because, I spot checked the next album then just for my own curiosity. High and Dry, I believe it's called. And the vocals are more present in the next album. I noted that like as a difference. And then I thought, this evolution would like just really be an indication of more of like a 70s guitar rock style to an 80s influence difference. So But yeah, I mean, it's true that it does sound significantly different, like from the first one even to the second one. Um, so yeah, more information is needed on that. But in conclusion, I will say too, like if this album and just spot checking high and dry like makes me think, I need to listen to some more of some Def Leppard. Because, like, those bands that have those hit songs that you've just heard thousands and thousands of times, like, sometimes such big hits can, like, overshadow a lot of their great material that they have, like, on, their entire discography. And I think for Def Leppard, like, that definitely could be the case. And sometimes, the big radio hits can be, like, I don't want to say lowest common denominator because that is a like derogatory thought. But it's like you have to appeal to the most amount of people. And maybe like you're not going to get that with these crazy like modal guitar solos and stuff like that that you would have. So sometimes, and I've seen it too, like from personal working experience, that there are artists that are like significantly more talented than the hit songs that they have. It can be dumbed down a little bit. So it's always good to explore like the other material that people have. So, oh man, I feel like I just like I don't know. I try not to geek out too hard. I hope that made like any kind of freaking sense, you guys. Like, yes, the next thing I'm gonna do, I think the next couple of days, I'm gonna try to do some cleanup here on my end. And I'm like desperately wanting to get my first audio lesson out. Like that, I want that to be the next thing I work on. Um, the reason I haven't, I wanted to get a lot of this stuff out, but like the reason I haven't totally, gone full into doing that is because like it's going to be a PowerPoint presentation and it's going to be pre-recorded. It's not off the cuff. It's totally scripted. I have all of the slides made. I have the script done. I have exactly when I changed the slide, all the concepts that I want to present, exactly the way I want to say it. And so, it's really not meant to be something I just like write an outline and wing it. Like I want it to be very cleaned up and purposeful in that manner. So it just takes like a little more work. Um, but yeah, it's going to be called What is Sound? I believe the first part of it is going to be two-parter, I think, for What is Sound, because the lesson as it grew just became so massive. I realized like I was going to have to split it in two. So focus on part one and see how far I can get with that. If I can't get through that, I'll jump on here and do some other stuff. Whatever happens to come up in the moment. I know I've had a couple of requests for people to talk about certain things. So, and yes, I am actually keeping a spreadsheet. I want you guys to know if you ever want to hear something, it's going on the spreadsheet. Um, it all just depends on like what happens in the moment too. So, anyway, listen to some Def Leppard, pull up this album On Through the Night. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope you have an awesome rocking time listening to this great album. And I will see you back here again very soon.